Before we dive into this incredible story, if you're enjoying these untold Hollywood secrets, please hit that like button and subscribe for more shocking celebrity revelations. Your support means the world to us. Now, let's get into this amazing story. It was September 15th, 1947, and 17-year-old Clint Eastwood was standing on the stage of Oakland Technical High School's auditorium, his tall frame slightly hunched with nervousness as he prepared to audition for the school's fall drama production. Drama teacher Harrison Caldwell, known throughout the school for his theatrical temperament and cutting remarks, sat in the front row with his arms crossed, already looking skeptical. "Eastwood," Caldwell said in his precise theatrical voice, "I hope you've prepared something more substantial than last semester's attempt." Clint had chosen a monologue from Of Mice and Men, hoping to show he could handle serious dramatic material. What happened next would become one of the most humiliating moments of young Clint's life, but it would also plant the seed of determination that would eventually make him one of the most iconic actors in film history. And the teacher who tried to destroy his dreams would live to see just how spectacularly wrong he had been. Now, let me back up here and tell you about 17-year-old Clint Eastwood, because understanding who he was before he became a legend makes this story even more incredible. Clint had grown up in a working-class family that moved frequently throughout California during the Great Depression as his father searched for steady work. By the time they settled in Oakland, Clint was a quiet, introspective teenager who found solace in movies and had begun to dream of becoming an actor. Clint was always different from the other kids, recalled his childhood friend Don Loomis. He was quieter, more observant. He'd watch people carefully, like he was studying them. But Clint's passion for acting wasn't just about fame or glamour, it was his way of expressing emotions that he found difficult to share in real life. "I was a shy kid who didn't talk much," Clint said years later. "But when I was performing, I could be someone else, say things I couldn't normally say." However, not everyone appreciated Clint's understated approach to performance. Harrison Caldwell was a failed Broadway actor who had come to Oakland to teach high school drama after his own performing career had stalled. He believed that real acting required grand gestures, booming voices, and theatrical intensity. Caldwell was from the old school of acting, remembered former student Patricia Mills. He thought if you weren't chewing the scenery, you weren't really acting. When Clint had auditioned for his first school play the previous semester, Caldwell had been dismissive of his quiet, naturalistic style. "Your performance lacks passion, Mr. Eastwood," Caldwell had told him. "Acting is about projection, about filling the space with your presence." But Clint was determined to prove that his approach to acting had value, even if it didn't match his teacher's theatrical expectation. Actually, let me tell you about the monologue Clint chose for this crucial audition, because it would become both a source of humiliation and ultimate vindication. Clint had selected George's final speech from Of Mice and Men, the moment when George makes the heartbreaking decision to end Lenny's life. It was a powerful emotional piece that required subtlety and genuine feeling rather than theatrical bombast. "I chose that monologue because it was about friendship, loyalty, and making an impossible choice," Clint explained years later. "It was the kind of scene that couldn't be performed with artifice, it had to feel real." Clint had practiced the monologue for weeks, working on making every word feel authentic and emotionally true. But to Mr. Caldwell, choosing such an internal, understated piece was a mistake from the start. "Eastwood," Caldwell said when Clint announced his selection, "I hope you plan to bring more energy to this performance than you did to your last audition." "I'll do my best, sir," Clint replied quietly. "See that you do," Caldwell said dismissively. "Begin when ready." What happened next would haunt Clint for years and fuel his determination to prove his teacher wrong. Clint began the monologue with the same quiet intensity that would later make him famous. His performance was subtle, heartfelt, and completely authentic. He embodied George's anguish without resorting to melodrama. He spoke the words as if he truly was a man facing the most difficult decision of his life, his voice carrying the weight of friendship and loss. But as Clint performed, Mr. Caldwell's expression grew increasingly disapproving. When Clint finished the monologue, the auditorium was silent. His fellow students seemed moved by what they had witnessed, but Caldwell's face showed only contempt. "Mr. Eastwood," Caldwell said coldly, "that was one of the most lifeless performances I have ever witnessed. Don't forget to comment below and let us know what other inspiring comeback stories you'd like to hear about." Clint felt his stomach drop, but Caldwell wasn't finished. "You have no understanding of what acting actually requires. No projection, no presence, no emotional range." The words hit Clint like physical blows, but the teacher continued his devastating critique. "Furthermore, you lack the basic theatrical instincts necessary for any serious dramatic work. You'll never be an actor, Mr. Eastwood. You simply don't have what it takes. I suggest you focus your attention on more practical pursuits. Perhaps mechanics or construction work would be more suitable for someone with your limitations." The auditorium was dead silent. Clint's classmates looked shocked by their teacher's cruelty. Clint himself maintained his composure, but inside he felt like his world was crumbling. "Thank you for the feedback, Mr. Caldwell," Clint said quietly, though his voice was tight with emotion. As he walked off the stage, Clint could hear some of his classmates whispering sympathetically, but their support couldn't ease the sting of Caldwell's rejection. The immediate aftermath of Caldwell's humiliating critique was devastating for young Clint. "I went home that night and seriously considered giving up on acting altogether," Clint recalled years later. When someone in authority tells you that you'll never succeed at something you love, it's hard not to believe them. His mother, Ruth, found Clint sitting alone in his room that evening, staring out the window. "What's troubling you, son?" Ruth asked gently. When Clint told her what had happened, Ruth was furious. "That teacher doesn't know what he's talking about," she said firmly. "I've seen you perform and you have a gift for making people believe what you're saying." But Ruth's support, while meaningful, couldn't completely heal the wound that Caldwell had inflicted. For several weeks, Clint avoided the drama department entirely, too hurt and self-conscious to pursue his acting dreams. "I started to think maybe Caldwell was right," Clint admitted. "Maybe I was just kidding myself about having any talent." That's when something happened that would change everything. Clint was working his part-time job at a local movie theater when he watched a performance that would reignite his confidence. The film was The Treasure of the Sierra Madre, starring Humphrey Bogart. And as Clint watched Bogart's understated naturalistic performance, he realized something crucial. Bogart wasn't theatrical or bombastic, Clint observed. He was quiet, intense. He proved that great acting didn't have to be loud to be powerful. That night, Clint made a decision that would define the rest of his life. He wasn't going to change his approach to acting to please Mr. Caldwell. Instead, he was going to perfect his naturalistic style and prove that quiet intensity could be just as powerful as theatrical dramatics. "I decided that the best way to prove Caldwell wrong wasn't to become the kind of actor he wanted me to be. It was to become the best version of the actor I already was." The opportunity came sooner than expected. Actually, let me tell you what happened next, because this is where young Clint Eastwood showed the determination that would make him a legend. 3 months after his humiliating audition, Oakland Tech announced they were holding tryouts for their spring production of Our Town. Clint had been practicing relentlessly since his encounter with Caldwell, studying film performances and working on his craft. "I watched movies constantly, analyzing how the best actors used subtlety and restraint to create powerful performances," Clint said. When the audition day arrived, Clint was nervous but determined. He chose to perform a scene from Our Town itself, George Gibbs's proposal Pummelly, a moment that required genuine emotion and authentic connection. But this time, instead of trying to project or be theatrical, Clint leaned into his natural understated style with complete confidence. The audition was held in the same auditorium where Caldwell had humiliated him months earlier, and once again, Caldwell was judging the performances. When Clint's turn came, he walked onto the stage with a quiet confidence that hadn't been there before. He performed George's proposal with such genuine emotion and naturalistic truth that the entire room was mesmerized. His voice never rose above conversational level. His gestures were minimal, but every word carried the weight of authentic feeling. When he finished, the auditorium was completely silent for several seconds. Then slowly, his fellow students began to applaud, not the polite applause of a school audition, but genuine appreciation for something special they had witnessed. Even Mr. Caldwell looked stunned. "Eastwood," Caldwell said, his voice uncertain for the first time anyone could remember. That was quite different from your previous audition. Thank you, sir, Clint replied calmly. Later that day, the cast list was posted. Clint Eastwood had been cast as George Gibbs, the male lead. But more importantly, word of his audition began to spread throughout the school and the local theater community. The performance itself, when it opened 6 weeks later, was a revelation. Clint's portrayal of George Gibbs was so natural, so authentic, that audiences forgot they were watching a high school student perform. He made you believe that George was a real person, not a character in a play, recalled audience member Margaret Chen. It was like watching someone's actual life unfold on stage. Local newspaper critic James Morrison wrote, "Young Clint Eastwood's performance proves that great acting comes not from bombast, but from truth. This young man has a bright future ahead of him." The review was published in the Oakland Tribune, and Mr. Caldwell read it along with everyone else. After the final performance, something unprecedented happened. Mr. Caldwell approached Clint backstage. "Eastwood," Caldwell said, his usual arrogance replaced by something approaching humility, "I owe you an apology. I was wrong about your ability. Completely wrong." Clint looked at his former tormentor and realized that the anger he had carried for months had been replaced by understanding. "Mr. Caldwell," Clint said with the quiet dignity that would later make him an icon, "thank you for the apology, but I need to thank you too." Caldwell looked confused. "Thank me? You told me I'd never be an actor," Clint said with a slight smile. "That was exactly the motivation I needed." The story of Clint's triumph over Caldwell's rejection spread throughout Oakland's entertainment community and eventually reached Hollywood talent scouts. But more importantly, it established the foundation of Clint's approach to his craft: authentic, understated, and powerful without being loud. "Every role I've played since then has been built on the lessons I learned fighting back against Caldwell's criticism," Clint said years later. Within 2 years of his high school triumph, Clint was discovered by Universal Studios and began his professional acting career. Every Western hero, every cop, every character he would later portray, carried the DNA of that quiet, determined teenager who refused to let a teacher's rejection define his future. Mr. Caldwell continued teaching drama at Oakland Tech for another 15 years. According to former students, he never again told a student they would never be an actor. After what happened with Clint Eastwood, Mr. Caldwell became much more open to different acting styles, recalled former student David Park. "I think he learned that talent can express itself in ways he hadn't expected." In 1971, when Dirty Harry made Clint Eastwood one of the biggest stars in Hollywood, Mr. Caldwell sent a letter to the studio. "Dear Mr. Eastwood," it read, "I was wrong about everything except one thing. You were always destined for greatness, just not in the way I understood greatness. Your former teacher, Harrison Caldwell." Clint kept that letter in his office for the rest of his career. "It reminded me that even people who try to discourage us can sometimes teach us the most important lessons." The lesson that 17-year-old Clint Eastwood learned from Caldwell's cruel rejection was one that shaped his entire approach to life and career. Never let anyone else's limited vision become your reality. "If I had listened to Caldwell and given up on acting, I would have missed out on the most incredible journey," Clint reflected years later. But more importantly, audiences would have missed out on stories that meant something to them. The teacher who said you'll never be an actor to a 17-year-old kid from Oakland lived to see that kid become one of the most iconic performers in film history. Caldwell learned that great acting doesn't always look the way traditional teachers expect it to. And Clint Eastwood learned that the people who try to destroy your dreams often give you exactly what you need: the fire to prove them spectacularly wrong. The day that left everyone speechless wasn't just the day Clint proved his teacher wrong. It was the day he discovered that his quiet intensity, the very quality Caldwell had criticized, was actually his greatest strength as a performer. That revelation would carry him from Oakland High School to Hollywood superstar. From a teenager whose teacher said he'd never be an actor, to the man with no name, whose silent stare could command any screen, all because he refused to let someone else's narrow definition of talent limit his own possibilities. That's the power of persistence. That's the magic of staying true to yourself when others try to change you. That's how a 17-year-old kid with a dream became a legend. One quiet, authentic performance at a time, one role at a time, one movie at a time, until everyone who had ever doubted him, especially Mr. Caldwell was left absolutely speechless, not by failure, but by the kind of success that redefines what greatness looks like. Caldwell said, "You'll never be an actor." Clint Eastwood's response changed cinema forever and left everyone, especially his old drama teacher, completely speechless. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't proving you can do what they said you couldn't. It's proving that what they said was weakness was actually your greatest strength all along.